In just about 2 hours, Charlie Hebdo will be honored at a big New York City gala tonight. But after this Texas attack, there is plenty of controversy on the plate. Why Donald Trump says all this taunting ain't exactly helping the Donald here now. Welcome, everybody. I'm Neil Cavuto. And Cinco de Mayo, the French magazine targeted by terrorists for publishing controversial cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad, is about to receive the Freedom of Expression Courage Award at the Pan American Literary Gala tonight. That's a very big deal. It follows that shootout Sunday outside a Muhammad cartoon contest in Garland, Texas. To Donald Trump on if these type of events are just asking for trouble. He joins me now on the phone. Donald, good to have you. You were critical of the Texas event for doing just that. What do you think about this one planned in New York?
Well, I think this, Neil, and I think it's very simple. Our country has a lot of problems. We've got problems at every different level, whether it's economic or war and money that we're spending that we're not getting anything. We spend billions and billions of dollars fighting and even trillions of dollars fighting. We end up getting nothing out of it. And the last thing we need is an obnoxious blowhard like Geller to go out and start trouble when there's no reason for it. There's absolutely no. I'm a bigger believer in free speech than she is, believe me. And I think it's very, very important. And we can't allow people to get away with bad stuff, the kind of stuff they're doing, the beheadings. And we have to be tough, and we have to absolutely go in and wipe out the bad. But for her to go in, and I guess she makes money doing this, something has to happen. What is she doing it for? This has nothing to do with free speech. This is taunting, and all it does is cause trouble. And frankly, in Texas, they had a fantastic policeman, that did an unbelievable job, because these two guys were running in with AK-47s, and you would have had hundreds of people killed if this policeman didn't recognize the problem, and with a regular pistol, kill both people. So you would have had you would have had hundreds of people, and she knew that. She hired security all over the place. She knew that.
Well, you know, she says, Donald, you went a little far. She was on Fox talking about that. This is what she said about your criticism. I want you to listen.
And as far as Mr. Trump goes, he sure flaps his tongue and uses free speech and wishes to silence others. There's a war going on.
What do you think of that?
Well, there certainly is a war going on, and she should be much more responsible, because what she's doing is unnecessary. I'll give you an example. Let her go out and talk about Jesus. She's using this to show free speech. She's not using it for anything, and she's using it for her own purpose. She's a person that is doing this for her own purpose, Neil, and she's doing a terrible thing for our country.
Then what do you make of this Pan American Center Literary Gala? There are some writers there who are boycotting this event, thinking that this magazine is the last to get awarded for freedom of expression, that they argue that it promotes cultural intolerance, Islamophobia. So a number of prominent writers are opting out and protesting the events tonight. What do you think of that?
Well, I fully understand them opting out, and I know nothing about the magazine, but I do know that they call themselves satirical. Now, I've had satirical magazines over the years go after me, and what they do is use satire in order to not tell the truth. They make it satirical, and this way they can say anything they want about you. So they were taunting, and they really taunted, and guess where they are right now? I only say this. Nobody believes stronger in free speech than me, and I'm much tougher than she is in any different way you can, whether it's military, whether it's beating ISIS or anything else. But for her, with all the problems this country has, for this woman that nobody ever heard of, to go out and taunt, and that's what she's doing, and provoke attacks like the one that almost took place. I mean, this was a fantastic policeman, did a fantastic job.
I think the gist of her argument, and everyone understands the fact that she stirred the pot. There might be some truth to that, but this argument is that if you were president, let's say, she's not saying this, but if you were president, would you be afraid to attack Muslims or to go after them?
Just the opposite.
How would you answer that?
Just the opposite. If they're doing wrong, and for instance, the beheadings, I would do things that nobody would do. I would do things and be tougher than anybody. But what's the purpose of her doing this? I'll give you an example. If she went after, instead, Jesus instead of the Muslim, went after Jesus, let's see how long she'd last. If she went after the African Americans and went after the N-word, where she was positive on it as opposed to, let's see how long she would last. And that would also be freedom of speech. Let's see if she has the guts to do that. Let's see how long she'd last doing that. All she's doing, she's a provocateur. All she's doing is provoking and taunting people. And this country has enough problems right now.
All right, so
we have to be tough and we have to be strong. But you know what, Neil? We have to be smart, not dumb.
All right,
like
well, that seems to echo something Governor Mike Huckabee said today in announcing for president when it comes to taking on the guys he calls the bad guys. This is from Mike Huckabee today. I want your reaction.
When I hear our current president say he wants Christians to get off their high horse so we can make nice with radical jihadists, I wonder if he could watch a Western from the 50s and be able to figure out who the good guys and the bad guys really are.
What do you think of that?
Well, I agree. I mean, we have to be very tough because what's happening to Christians over there is just unbelievable, to look at the beheadings and everything else. And I'm very much involved in that whole situation also in terms of we have to be tough, we have to be smart, we have to be military.
Well, what do you think of his presidential chances?
I think it's a long shot. I mean, I think it's a long shot. And I like him. I think he's a great guy. I think he's a really nice guy. I think it's a long shot. I think most of them are long shots.
All right. Well, you mentioned in a prior visit Carly Fiorina, who's also in there now, the only woman in the race, the only former business executive in the race. You said at the time, look, you have a woman who got fired from her job, talking about her days at Hewlett-Packard, and I mean fired viciously. She got fired viciously. She then went out and lost in a landslide where she ran in California for senator. And I mean she lost in a landslide. She got clobbered. She took great offense to that.
Well, she doesn't have to take great offense, and I think she's probably a very nice woman. I don't know her. All I can say is you don't lose your job and get fired, and she did get fired viciously. You don't lose your job. You get fired for not doing a good job. You then go to California. You spend a lot of your money to run, and you lost in a landslide. You lose in a landslide, and now you say, okay, now I'm prepared to run for president. It doesn't work that way.
But, I mean, she does have business experience, whether she was forced out or whether there was a shareholder revolt or a board revolt.
But it's not positive business experience. She got fired. I built, as an example of I run, I built an unbelievable company worth billions and billions. And, by the way, if I run, I will put my financials out right on day one. If I run...
All your financials?
And it's going
all
to be,
your financials?
Yeah, my financials, all my financials.
That can be very messy.
Everything.
Donald, that could be messy stuff.
No, not messy at all. I mean, I built a great company. I have some of the great assets of the world. I've built some of the great real estate projects of the world. I've made a tremendous amount of money. And I would put, if I run, I would put that same ability to work for the American people, because we have to make our nation rich again in order to make our nation great again. We are now a debtor nation. We are being laughed at all over the world. China and Mexico and every country is eating our lunch. That wouldn't happen if I run and I win. Believe me, that would not happen.
Donald Trump, thank you very much. Good having you again.
All right. Thank you very much, Neil.
Well, you know, ISIS is taking a bow for that Texas attack that could have been a whole lot worse, but if true, it would mark the first time the terror group has actually hit here. To Catherine Herridge on what authorities know so far. Catherine.
Well, Neil, the U.S. intelligence community is aware and investigating this claim of responsibility by the ISIS radio station. And based on the evidence so far, the FBI has found no direct call to act. But at the very least, investigators believe the shooters were inspired by ISIS. A review of social media traffic shows that one of the shooters had contact with established ISIS Twitter handles overseas, and the tweets suggest they were providing encouragement, even mentoring advice. Within minutes of the attack, the tweets celebrated the mem, suggesting a personal connection. "I'm going to miss how he always used to speak," one said, with the tweet there on the bottom calling the shooter a man of wisdom. All of this suggesting prior contact, though no evidence of a direct call for action. The counterterrorism source also said the social media traffic links back to the American cleric Anwar al-Awlaki. His photo is there on the upper left. Awlaki was killed in a CIA drone strike in 2011, but remains the public face and inspiration of the new digital jihad. At the White House briefing today, reporters asking whether the administration is guaranteeing the necessary assets to take on ISIS on social media.
Well, this is something that the United States government has been focused on in both of these issues, both in terms of foreign fighters as well as efforts that are underway by extremists, including those inside ISIL, to use social media to try to radicalize individuals and inspire them to carry out acts of violence. We're mindful of both threats.
And today we also heard from the mothers of the two suspects, Elton Simpson and Nader Sufi. Both women said that they forgave the police officer who shot and killed their sons, and also added that they were blindsided by the radicalization and this plot in Texas. Neil.
Catherine, as always, thank you very much. Catherine Herridge. Well, if ISIS was behind this Texas attack, it failed. But former CIA analyst Fred Flight says that does not mean the terror group isn't planning similar such attacks somewhere else. And you always got to wonder, Fred, where? I mean, obviously they're taking a bow for this. What do you think they're doing?
Well, Neil, I'm concerned that the mainstream media is playing down how serious this incident in Texas was. We had a heavily armed assailant. They were wearing body armor. They had assault rifles. They were stopped by a SWAT team, a large police presence, and a traffic cop who somehow killed them with a service revolver. What worries me is that the next time we're not going to be so lucky. There's going to be heavily armed attackers, and there may not be any police around. There may just be one or two cops. I think it will be very, very serious.
You know, you got to wonder. You're quite right. I mean, they were loaded for God knows what. And if not for a very fast-acting policeman, I mean, it could have been very different. But we never see the could-have-beens. We see what ultimately happened. But do you think that these type of orchestrated attacks pegged by an event that is publicized is what drives them? Or is this just an example of how they will operate in this country if they get the chance?
Catherine Herridge, I think, is the expert in the news media about this, and I agree with everything that you just said. But if you look at the press reporting so far, this attack was driven by ISIS and probably Al-Qaeda. These guys didn't decide to attack this on their own. There's an Al-Qaeda leader in Australia and an Al-Qaeda leader in Somalia, both of whom called for attacks on this center in Texas. They drove from Arizona. Someone gave them the idea to conduct this attack. And I think it's time to stop arguing, well, was this terrorism or was ISIS behind it? It was international terrorism, and ISIS was most certainly behind it.
Do you think a lot of attention to be paid to this big literary event in New York that is going to celebrate and reward Charlie Hebdo magazine? I'm wondering whether that's the kind of stuff that brings them out, and whether authorities, I assume as a given, are on a heightened alert and a heightened presence.
I think that's a good point. I mean, this law enforcement deserves a lot of credit for recognizing that there was a possibility of a homegrown terrorist attack in Texas. And I think that could be the same. We could say the same thing about anything related to Charlie Hebdo. But there's going to be other attacks that aren't as obvious. And we know, at least concerning this jihadist group in Australia, they're looking every day to find ways to attack the West. So I think we really have to be vigilant.
All right, well put on all counts. Fred Flights, as always, thank you, sir.
Good to be here.
Well, this 25-year-old New York police officer is dead. Why something a Washington, D.C. councilwoman is proposing has officers there thinking this passes? Well, they might as well be.